Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin Sokolov, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Ronnie Ward. How's it going today, Ron?
It's going great, Kristin. We're still reeling off some of these great episodes that we've had, and We're growing, and we appreciate everyone for checking it out. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to get the right people at the right time. So,
seriously.
Please keep downloading and listening and sharing and all of that stuff.
And I was just telling you the one with Justin that premiered last week. I listened to it literally twice, and it's an hour and a half. I literally, and you know what's interesting, Ron? When you listen to a podcast, you listen to it the first time. I highly recommend people listening to podcast episodes twice, because then you glean so much more off of it. It was almost like I was listening to a completely different conversation the second go around. And
Kristin, here's the thing. Of course, it's my word, but I've known Justin a long time, and he is one of the most honest people. And when he tells you that he traveled with Pete Hegseth and about the Panama Canal being taken over by China, like, you can take that to the bank. My word, but I'm telling you. We've had people characterize that episode as an exclusive, and I think it absolutely was an exclusive interview. So you want to check that one out, folks. But we've got something interesting today as well.
Yeah, we're talking about groupthink, and we've talked about this very, very briefly in past episodes. And, you know, groupthink, we're going to dive into it, really what it is, outside of just what it sounds like it is. It rarely happens because people are dumb, right? Most of the time it happens in rooms full of smart, credentialed, highly experienced people with degrees, people with titles, people who absolutely should know better. And yet everyone in the room ends up agreeing with a bad idea.
No, it's true. And Kristin, we talk a lot about childhood programming, environmental influences, and a lot of times you have people who from early in life, they go with the flow. They find out early that things go better for them. And instead of building up, the resilience or the mechanisms they need in their brain, they just go with the flow. And it's pretty rare, actually. And we're going to show you, folks, you don't want to go anywhere. There's some interesting experiments we're going to talk about. Yeah. But we're going to show you how there are very few people will really go against the grain.
Right. Absolutely. Groupthink really is that desire for group harmony, because this harmony, when this happens, it becomes more important than the pursuit of truth. And then once that happens, smart people stop thinking. And Ron, we've talked about leading teams. I remember doing the Strengths Finder, and 2 people on my team of 8, their number one was harmony. And I really did know I had to approach this group differently when they crave harmony so much that it shows up as a top strength.
That's exactly right. And that's why we have to get to know our staff.
Yes.
You will be able to tell. Chris and I have talked a lot about brown nosers, but truthfully, they fall in this category. But the thing a brown noser will do is sneak around behind the group's back and then tell the boss what the boss wants to hear. So, it's still groupthink, but you have those people sometimes that will let you know. And I love that you did strength finders. There are some quality assessments that you can get to know your team. And I tell everyone, if you want to scale a business, you've got to surround yourself with people who will step out of the group, we call them contrarians, and tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sponsored. We're not sponsored by StrengthsFinder. But I have to say, I did that for a decade at least. And it's a $20 investment. If your corporate doesn't cover it, it was a $20 investment. And that felt like my employees would tell me that they felt like I truly was investing in them as a person. Like, it went far. And then it really helps you. So it's a win-win there. But let's talk about, a relatable scenario here. Let's think about the workplace. You're sitting in a meeting at work, the boss rolls out a new strategy, and immediately, Ron, you've probably experienced this, a couple people speak up, great idea, I love it, this is exactly what we need. And meanwhile, there's someone sitting in that meeting thinking, this plan is a disaster, but they don't say it.
Right. It plays out every day. It's playing out right now while we're making this podcast somewhere.
But you were thinking, Ron's like, this is a disaster.
And then I think it's almost self-gaslighting when someone goes, am I the only one seeing this? Like,
yeah, that is interesting. I mean, exactly. Their brain starts doing something fascinating. They start doubting themselves. Well, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe everyone else understands this better than I do. I've done that before. And then suddenly the silence wins.
That's exactly right. And when we go through our coaching exercises, people doubt themselves a lot. So again, this goes back to the strength of your character. If someone has lived their life in strength, or they had parents that taught them to be strong and stand up to bullies and these kind of things, but Kristin, it really does go back to childhood, and the self-gaslighting happens, but what's really beneath that is you want to be wrong so you don't have to stand out. So you are literally talking yourself into the fact that those people must be right. We don't want to cause any waves here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was leading my class through a Latin lesson yesterday, and this happened 2 times within just a few minutes. My students would go to answer it, and then they'd get half the word out, and then they go, oh, no, maybe. And I'm like, go with that gut, right? Like, I feel like when they were second guessing themselves mid-answer. And that happens a lot, and that's why a lot of people struggle with test taking. They second guess themselves or overanalyze. When a lot of times, like, what comes to you naturally or your first instinct is accurate.
And Kristin, most people say, yeah, I don't do that, but I've done it multiple times in my life. You said you've done it. And we're gonna look at some other experiments, but I just had one pop up when I was testing, the audio. There was a guy would get on an elevator, and everyone would turn after the elevator started running. They're all paid actors. They would turn and face the back of the elevator, and it was just so funny. People would start looking. You could see that their wheels turning in their brain, like, what's this about? Am I supposed to? And the more people do it, of course, the more pressure. So, and then these people would stand, he would turn to the back, facing the back, and the elevator doors in the front. So it's a very interesting phenomenon that happens in the brain. But if people are listening and you do this often, you need to think back to childhood and start to reprogram your brain, and we'll get more into that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the psychology of conformity, we're going to dive into that now. The behavior isn't just anecdotal. I mean, psychologists have studied this for decades. And I know you're excited to dive into this. One of the most famous experiments was conducted in the 50s by psychologist Solomon Asch, and it's called the Asch Conformity Experiment. Now, people may be familiar with that, but participants were asked to match the length of lines on a card. And the correct answer was obvious, right? But everyone else in the room who were secretly part of the experiment, they gave the wrong answer. And here's what happened. You can probably guess. About 75% of participants went along with the group at least once, even though they could clearly see the correct answer.
Yeah, and that Asch Conformity Experiment, it really does tell us how the human brain works, the confidence of the individual. There's so many things at play. But we went beneath the surface about childhood, but we also have this longing to be a part of a tribe. And we're going to discuss that a little bit, but think about it. You're sitting there in black and white. I watched this experiment, by the way, Kristin. Yeah. And there's 2 lines that are obviously the same length, and the others are off enough to see it. And then these people still go, I guess it's those other 2 lines that are not the same length. It was crazy to watch, but we all judge until we're in that room. Who knows?
I know. Mind-boggling. I always think about like a jury and how you have rarely, but you do have the one person that goes against the grain. And I can only imagine the pressures, right? I've never had to knock on wood, I've never had to do jury duty or anything like that. But I can imagine when you have 11 going in one direction and you're the one person, the cog that's trying to go in the opposite direction. That's rare. And there's a lot of pressure there.
Kristin, I started to add that. It's interesting that you brought that up. I started to add that to this episode. But think about it. They go through jury selection, Voltaire for you brainiacs out there. and they select a jury. Well, it only takes one person in a normal trial to tip the scales. So imagine one person wields a little more power, but you are correct when you say that. I've had people tell me there's a person with a strong personality. They start questioning everything. They start requesting that you bring in more documentation and all this stuff, and it creates doubts in the minds of the jury. Now the jury system is wonderful, but don't think that it's beyond reproof, because it is, or beyond reproach, because you can have one person that literally sways everyone.
Right. I totally can see that. And the reason behind that, I mean, there's many reasons, but human beings, like you said, we are tribal creatures. And for most of human history, survival depended on belonging to a group. We see that in the animal kingdom, right? If you were kicked out of the tribe, you didn't just lose friends, you died.
That's exactly right. Banishment equaled death, and because you just couldn't survive with the animals, you needed to cover all those things, and that was one of the worst. Back before we had the legal system we have today, banishment was one of the most popular. They just say, you're gone, you can never return again. It was like a death sentence, of course.
Yeah. They do that in the Amish community. That's something, right? Like, you think about a deterrent being banished. That is powerful.
I may not be correct, but I think it's called shunning. They shun you.
Yes, you're right. You're right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I love to watch. As a matter of fact, Kristin lit the whistle. We're going to do something on cults. And I've been really studying cults and find that quite interesting. So it would play along with this episode very well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Our brains evolved to have very powerful instinct. Stay with the tribe. Agree with the tribe. Don't challenge the tribe. We've all heard this saying, like, too many chiefs, right? Like, you didn't want to go against the chief or the head honcho in whatever group you were in, because disagreement historically meant danger. And even today, the ancient instinct still exists, even in boardrooms.
In boardrooms, of course, we've never seen it so tribal as it is now in politics.
Yeah.
But we won't get down that road too far. I'll get Kristin fired up, folks.
Yeah.
So now, instead of getting kicked out of the tribe, you are labeled difficult. And there's a term called triangulation, Kristin, where you don't confront someone directly, but you triangulate by talking to someone else. You just start to pose doubt. This person seems like they're really off their game, or, I've heard they're having marital problems. And what you do is you begin to use other people, and you triangulate. So the victim's at the apex of that triangle, and then you got this process going on around them. And it's used all the time. It plays out. So you don't say anything directly. You just start to put doubt in people's mind to diminish this person. And it works. So... folks, we said we had another psychology experiment, and I think you're going to find this one very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And these are pretty old. When we talked about the Asch Conformity, that was the 1950s. This was in 1961, and we call it the Milgram experiment. And Milgram had actors again, or an actor who was in a room, and he was supposedly going to get shocked. He brought in these people, and he said, we're going to ask questions. And if this person answers incorrectly, we want you to shock him. Again, the person on the other side of the room is an actor, but when they would shock him, he would yell. He would grimace in pain. And do
you think this is where The Simpsons got their episode 1 idea from? That's literally what they did to each other in episode 1.
I don't remember episode, but I'm sure it is.
I bet it is, honestly.
It's almost scary, the things that The Simpsons get right.
I know.
So picture this, folks. Actor on one side of the wall. They're asking him questions. If he answers it wrong, the person in a lab coat representing authority shock him. So this keeps going, and to the point where they're turning up the amps. And they know that they are producing more current, and it's painful. So he grimaces louder. He's yelling. Then he goes silent. Kristin, this is the scary part.
And they can't see him, right?
They can't see him, but it's silence. He's not even answering questions.
Oh my gosh.
The person in the lab coat says, shock him. 65%, it might have been 65 or 66% continued to shock.
Even though he could be dead on the other side of the wall.
Even though he could be dead on the other side of the wall.
Heart attack. Oh my gosh.
How much does that tell you about tribal?
Oh my goodness. Too much. And that's in the 60s. Imagine, with the technology we have today. Yeah. Different experiments are probably being conducted
Let me throw in one other thing.
Yeah.
The belief, the hypothesis was we'll be able to tell who's a psychopath or sociopath, right? That's what they thought was going to come out of it. Turns out it's the majority.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was really crazy.
So that was the original. See, I didn't know that. That was the original objective, was it like a group of questionable people that maybe were...
No, I think it was just a random selection.
Just that random.
But
interesting.
the early, the psychologists thought that's probably, there's going to be I think they estimated seriously like 0.8% will continue to shock.
It's interesting because that's right about the time in the 60s where they started profiling, the criminal profiling.
That's right.
That wasn't done until then.
Yeah, this was a huge breakthrough in the human mind, for sure.
Wow. Very, very interesting. Want to dive into we think a little bit here. We've talked about the tribal psychology. It shows up in everyday life in a really funny way, I guess you could say. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is where this actually drives me nuts, Ron. This is where people start speaking in we. Mm-hmm. So we speak, not I, we. And I see it a lot with couples. My brother-in-law did that. And he was like, we like this about him and his wife. And for some reason, that just drives me nuts. So I called him out. I'm like, what do you like? I can't help myself. But have you experienced that?
Yeah. And Kristin, I got a funny story for you. When I was a kid, I walked into the store. And the guy, it was like an auto parts store. My dad took me all the time. They had these big, thick books. They didn't have the internet, but it was always so cool. It smelled unique. So the guy starts telling us about things. He goes, yeah, and I've got this. And then he said, we have. So I asked my dad. I thought he owned the store.
Oh,
and my dad said, no, he works there. But I was impressed with that he was taking on the we. But then later in life, I learned a term called force teaming. I mentioned it one time, so I'll be very brief, folks. But Galvin de Becker wrote the book Gift of Fear, and he showed how this guy was going to rape and kill this woman. So he used guilt transfer, but he also used force teaming. She had groceries, and he goes, oh, let me help you. She had her cat food fell out. And he said, we have a hungry cat up there. Use the word we.
Interesting.
He put the can back in the bag, and she let him follow her right up to her apartment door. And she said, she had already said, I'm fine. And he goes, oh, come on, you can be too prideful. Let me help you. So he did a guilt transfer on her. Force teaming, guilt transfer, gets to her door. Then he says, no, I want to help you set them down because I always finish what I start. Oh. So he made that like abstract, and so then she lets him in. Long story short, he sexually assaults her, but fortunately he couldn't shoot a gun. He had a gun, but he went in the kitchen, started getting what she believed would be a knife to kill her, and she sneaks past him with just a sheet on, runs down the hallway. This elderly couple lets her in their apartment, and she escaped with her life.
Oh my goodness.
But force teaming, folks, if you want to learn dark psychology, I had someone tell me, he wanted me to help him move, and he goes, yeah, I think we can get this done in an hour. I said, wait a minute. Good try.
Walk that back. Oh, totally. I mean, you'll hear people say things like, we loved that movie. Even if you're just, it's one thing if they're they're both sitting there with you, right? Like, that's okay. But when you're just talking to one and it's, we loved that movie. We think that restaurant is overrated. We don't watch that show. It drives me nuts. Is this a marriage or a voting block? I mean, why does that bother me so much, Ron?
Yeah, well, it should. And you should look at the person. If you want to silence this, just go blink 3 times if you're in trouble.
I think that might be what it triggers. It's like, I'm a big advocate of personal identity. Even when I'm in an 18-year marriage here, right? My husband, I love this about him. He actually, remember, he thought that we had been before you and I even met. Here you're in South Carolina, I'm in Oregon. He was like, wait, you guys hadn't met yet? And I'm like, when was I in South Carolina? Like we have such a strong individual identity that doesn't even, it's just, I find it humorous, actually. It's probably on the extreme end, but I prefer that. And so when someone loses their individual identity, it really irks me.
Folks, don't listen to Kristin. If your wife's missing for 3 days.
Well, not like that. Goodness.
I'm kidding. Kristin, I saw a meme. I don't know if you saw this when this guy's talking, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to get a divorce. And the guy goes, why? And he says, well, she's laying out at bars. She's all over town at night. He goes, what's she doing? He said, looking for me.
Oh, my gosh. So bad. I'm not talking about I'm talking get a freaking hobby of your own, right? Like have something interesting that you don't do together that you can talk about. And believe me, it keeps it interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I think some people in the marriage think they're wearing the lab coat and they can speak for everyone,
Yes.
So you have to ask yourself humorously in these cases, like, you got a husband speaking for the wife or vice versa. You're like, did somebody in the house hold a press conference?
Yeah.
Did I miss something?
They have a press secretary.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, exactly. It's like the State of the Union of marriage. Yeah. I think moving on, I've beat that one to a dead horse, but it really irks me. And I do think it's important. It's one thing in the household, but also people are doing this in the workplace way too often.
Yeah. No, they really are. Let's move down to the danger in organizations. This is going to be a rather quick episode, but I think it's driving a very important point home.
Yeah,
so get us started
absolutely.
on the danger in organizations, Kristin.
Yeah. So when that instinct shows up inside organizations, it becomes dangerous because organizations make high stakes decisions. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars, military strategy, public policy, corporate direction. And then the higher up you go in leadership, the worse this problem can become.
Yeah, and Kristin, I have to bring up the last episode. If you think about it, when Justin talked about being on Doge, they thought everyone would agree, it would be a great idea. But there were outspoken critics on the left. And then we didn't think so much about the entrenched contracting world where I've got contracts to water plants for $50,000 a month. Of course, I disagree with you. So people started putting their selfish interests ahead of what was right because they were embedded. And then the groupthink started. Let's criticize them. Let's diminish their authority. Let's make them look stupid. And it was all designed because they did not want these government cuts. And it played out perfectly. And there's a lot of tribal thinking. Remember when I asked Justin, I said, maybe it should have been my bipartisan, the group conducting the audit. And he said they were invited. No one showed up. Do you think there's not one person on the left that wanted to be in that group? Probably, but they knew they weren't permitted. So I think that plays right into this.
And that's why we briefly touched on Fetterman earlier. And that's why he is somebody, God bless him, because he is bold enough to go with what he feels is right, not what he feels his party feels is right.
Do you know what?
And that is unique.
I loved about him when they, his party was really angry because at the State of the Union, he shook President Trump's hand. He's the only Democrat that shook his hand. And he said on a podcast, he said, my parents taught me respect. Of course, I'm going to shake the President of the United States hand. And I thought, man, if we could just go back, if we could just have a baseline of respect, just a baseline.
I know.
Oh, anyway.
Seriously. And I will say, I did, you remember, I built a whole episode around how poorly he dresses. It was all about dressing sharp and professional. So I will say, I still don't agree with sweatpants in Congress, but I do like the fact that groupthink is not something that he lives and dies by.
Yeah, I didn't buy his, they asked him about that, and he said, yeah, it's really the only thing comfortable, and he can't find suits. And I'm like, have you ever seen NBA players? I think you can find a suit. You may not want to pay for it, but
I know.
If Shaq can find a suit, I think you can. So
there's the Men's Warehouse Big and Tall, if you need to hit that up. But I've heard him say that too. I'm like, okay, buddy. All right. But, we're just talking about the hierarchy, and the higher up you go, hierarchy really does amplify that groupthink. When the boss speaks first, everyone else starts adjusting their opinion to match the boss. Not necessarily the truth, but the boss.
No, it's very true. And I've seen an instance where there was a group, they united against the boss. So, but it's still groupthink. It's still the same thing. But Kristin, as you can imagine, I was in meetings at pretty high level when I was on that federal law enforcement board. And you can just watch those dynamics play out. You can even see someone when they make, and I know everyone listening has seen this, they will start making a recommendation and realize they're reading the room that it's not the right one, and then change gears right in the middle of the sentence. Or someone else is in disagreement, and then they're like, well, yeah, that's what I meant to say. That stuff goes all the way back to childhood. And if you are listening, if you want to be an effective leader, you have to know your values. When I teach decision making, you can go with any decision as the wind blows. You better know your values, or you're going to fall somehow. You may not be shocking someone in another room, but you are going to fall victim to this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Ron, I want to ask you something. So have you ever been in a meeting where everyone is agreeing with something? I mean, you're talking about it right now, but I want to get pretty specific here. And you personally, so as this is being discussed, you personally knew that the plan or whatever was being discussed, there was a serious problem with it.
Yeah, I've never told this story, Kristin, but I will not mention names to protect the guilty. Anyway, so
I'm excited.
I got put over this project, and it had originally been designed in D.C., so there was this distrust between Charleston, the academy, and D.C., which is the mothership. So I got put on this project, but I had these guys telling the boss, Ron likes D.C. He's in their pocket. He'll go along with them. So, and remember, these are type A personalities. These are like the two other guys were firearms and safety instructors, and they were just all machos. So we're in this meeting. Now, it was very simple. The number one, all the major players in DC are on this call. So basically the person who developed this software program was supposed to remove that it's being used at the academy, because the boss of the academy before me, she rejected it. And she said, get our name off of it. We're not using it.
Okay.
So she's going through all the different agencies using this software, and it said the academy. These two guys, I'm supposed to be in this meeting, but they come in the meeting. They didn't even take chairs. I just remember this vividly. They're sitting on the desk. They're jacked. They work out. So they literally, and I had the phone on mute. They go, what the hell? She was supposed to remove it. They're going off. And I'm in this meeting. They go, Ron, tell her. And I said, I will, but I'll call her afterwards. They storm out the door. They go down the hall to the director, the academy director's office, basically saying that, we got ripped off by DC. Ron's naive. He didn't do a thing.
Whoa.
So anyway, Kristin, this was a scary moment in my career. I could hear them, by the way. We got off that call. I was so angry. Please don't do this, folks, or don't say I recommended it. I walked straight down to the academy, which would later be my office, by the way. I walked in and I said, those two Neanderthals completely humiliated me, and you let those stupid bastards run this program, because I'm done. And I walked out, shut the door, got in my car, Kristin.
Oh, wow.
Got in my car and went home.
I have not heard this story.
I debated whether it came up one other time in my brain when we were doing a podcast, but in my mind, this was probably 3:15 and the day ends at 4:30. About a mile after I get off of the federal law enforcement campus, it starts to sink in. Oh, crap. I may get
You're like,
fired.
did I just quit?
I may get fired. True story, though, to her credit. The next day, now she had someone opposite of them in her ear. The next day, we have a staff meeting, and she goes, guys, you got something to say to Ron? And both of them apologized to me in that meeting.
Wow.
And I said, it's fine. But by the way, on my way home, I had called DC, and got it. The lady literally said, yeah, I saw that. I totally forgot, but it was she goes, yeah, I already removed it now. But it was such paranoia when we came because they thought, DC doesn't support the academy, which was not true. The more I got into it, I realized DC was very unorganized and didn't return phone calls because of that. But it wasn't.
Which can feel like a lack
does
of
feel
support.
like it. And if you got the right people creating the tribe saying they're trying to destroy us.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
That's very interesting, Ron.
It was a tough day.
There's so many
Kristin.
things we could. Yeah. I mean, I
day.
bet you were living on Tums that night, unsure what the morning was going to be
I don't
like.
think I slept well because I thought,
No way.
But I thought I would get a phone call that afternoon, but I didn't. But I had to walk in, and figure out what's going on. And then there was a staff meeting called. And then I was like, well, surely to God, they're not going to fire me in a group setting. At least bring me
that
in by
would be
myself.
Reassuring. Yeah, that would be very inappropriate.
So, anyway.
Oh my goodness.
How
crazy.
It happened.
But good for you. You have to stand up for yourself in situations like that. And maybe like you were saying, like you don't recommend this. Maybe, there's different ways to do it. But I bet they didn't mess with you again.
Well, I became academy director, and I think
they really didn't mess with you.
But I think showing that assertiveness and individualism, I think impressed the academy director because these two guys were, they were. I'm not going to say bully, but they were the leaders when we first got there. They were running the show, and to stand up to them, it ended up serving me well.
Yeah.
But when you said not to do it, we are encouraging you to be an individual and stand up. I did have my temper got to me, but keep in mind, guys, it's not like I was super brave. I believed in the mission, and I believed that DC had the purse strings, and I was smart enough to know that you don't just humiliate your employer. So that part of it, I think I was totally right, and that's what made me feel so justified. Now, my temper did get in when I heard them yelling about me down the hallway.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That would make anyone mad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's highly inappropriate. But, wow, that's a great story, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that because there are so many people listening that have been up against something at least similar and not known how to handle it.
Yeah, one side note, don't call your coworkers Neanderthals. But go ahead, Kristin.
Oh, my gosh. That's fantastic. All right, so let's talk about, you talk about the contrarian, right? Like, because you and I would say we're more on the positive end. Talk to me about the contrarian. What do you think about when you hear that? What do they act like?
The word is just contrary to popular belief,
right, against the grain.
So I will say that if you create, I always had these, as a matter of fact, I think I had too many sometimes, but if you create psychological safety, if you ask the right questions and you listen to the answers and you thank someone for sharing their opinion, even if you disagree, you're creating an atmosphere for your contrarians to thrive. Now, we all know this. I was coaching someone the other day and I said, are they rejecting you or your ideas? We all know that a contrarian, if their attitude is, inappropriate or if they use the wrong verbiage. So a lot of times I coach people on when you are wanting to present an idea, it's how you present it. Yeah. You could say, may I make this suggestion? Or I suggest you don't go, oh, this is stupid. We need to do it this way. And I've seen people that do that.
I know, I have too.
And it's very important how you present your ideas if you want to be effective. But every leader, you must have contrarians. We all have blind spots. There's no perfect leader. There was one, and then they crucified him. So we know that there's no perfect leader. You got to have people who will talk to you, but that needs to be a healthy rapport, not an I told you so.
Exactly. Because I have had people in a meeting, rarely, but where I would be presenting something, generally it was coming from corporate, and then I'm the presenter as middle management. And they'd be like, that's stupid. And it does break trust if they don't bring their opinion to the table in a professional way or in a respectful way. And because then I think I can't trust their response, right? I can't trust that they're going to be appropriate. So I think that it's really important that we understand the level of importance when it comes to your delivery.
Yeah.
Okay, Ron, let's talk to us. So we're talking about the contrarian. We've talked about that before because you and I are more on the optimist end, right? We've talked about positivity. We even did an episode where positivity can go overboard, right? That's not us. We look for the truth, and so we're not, just blindly positive. What was the name of that episode that we did? That got great feedback.
Extreme optimism.
Extreme optimism. Yeah. So that was a great one for people to check out if you're curious about that.
Kristin, I was on the Clear Voice podcast. I don't know if you saw any of the excerpts from that, but
no.
The head of that podcast, James Grooms, literally mentioned extreme optimism that he listened to that episode from the podcast. He asked how you and I started it. So it was pretty cool to get to. We're starting to think historical now on this podcast, which is interesting.
I know, right? Let's talk about something, a historical example here. One of the most studied examples of groupthink in history is the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. I was just talking about this with my son because he's like, are we going to take over Cuba next? And I'm like, all right, let's talk about, because he's like, it should be easy. It's a tiny little country. So I was like diving into the Bay of Pigs. So that's when Kennedy's advisors supported invading Cuba. And on paper, the plan looked strong. I mean, look at my 11-year-olds. He's like, it's a tiny country. Yeah, right? Like that would be so easy. But later analysis revealed something shocking. Several advisors privately had serious doubts, but they didn't challenge the consensus forcefully enough. And within days of the invasion, the invasion collapsed. And what if they would have actually voiced their concerns, Ron?
Yeah, and there's no, it's true. There's a side element to this that they created enough doubt to they didn't want U.S. military to be seen by other countries. So they did a half-hearted attempt to provide support and rescue the people, the dissidents who had fled Cuba and come back in. They thought they would lead this revolt, and they didn't. So not only was that groupthink, it can cause you to, even if you do it half-heartedly. Your son is exactly right. We could easily have taken Cuba, but we were trying to do it under the shadow, so that we wouldn't look bad. So it was a disaster.
And that was something where I was like, I didn't say half-heartedly. I probably should have. I said, we did it half-ass, So same thing there. It's like when you do something, if you want to achieve, you need to go in, full force there. Kennedy himself later said something fascinating. He realized his leadership style unintentionally encouraged groupthink, which that talks about his leadership style. The fact that he actually admitted that's pretty big. So he actually took it as far as changing how meetings were ran after that.
He was so sharp, and I think the mistake at Bay of Pigs was one of the deciding factors in the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think he learned a lesson because, let's be honest, generals are trained to fight, and they want to go to war. And he had his Joint Chiefs telling him, let's bomb Russia. And who knows what would have happened.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, we talk about politics briefly, right? We can dive into that. There's groupthink. We touched on this earlier. Groupthink constantly in politics. Political parties become tribes. I feel like more than ever we see that now. And, once that happens, loyalty to the tribe becomes more important than questioning ideas. Now, I will say the left is much better at this than the right. The right likes to branch off into like 5 different things, and the left stays in lockstep, really.
Yeah. No, and there's probably not much reason to go into politics, but I think eventually if people say the same things over and over, like I was reading something on a post, I'm making this up, but it said something like, the sky is blue, and the other person said, yeah, of course someone from the left would think that, or the right. Like everything if people have a political mind, they can't think beyond that. And I just think at some point you got to look at the big picture here, and it's our country. And sometimes when we're winning, are we winning or are we losing? I'm not sure because we all still live in this place together. So I'm hoping that I don't know what it's going to take, but that we can stop being parrots and start thinking. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, let's bring it back to corporate here. I want to bring up, there's some companies that come to mind. There's some corporate examples of groupthink, and groupthink has been blamed for massive corporate failures. Enron, we've talked about that one before. Enron, Blockbuster, Kodak. I mean, this is, even though Kodak's actually made a little comeback, they've rebranded. Have you seen their stuff around?
Think about this. I grew up not that far from the headquarters of Kodak in Tennessee, and I had family that, literally a lot of my family on my dad's side, they worked at Kodak. So they have made a comeback, but the point being that they just didn't see the digital footprint on the wall. They're still doing old-fashioned, there's a lot of different things that happen. But you could say the same thing. Enron was a leader who he refused any diverse opinions, and he was lying, and everyone just echoed it.
Yeah.
So these are all, and then Blockbuster, of course, did not see the handwriting on the wall either. They're similar to Kodak.
And there's one Blockbuster left here in Oregon.
I was getting ready to say you've got the last one.
I know. I need to go there and check it out. I've never been. But each of these cases, internal voices were warning about problems, but leadership teams became echo chambers. And that really is toxic. Reality gets filtered out.
We've already mentioned it, but Netflix approached Blockbuster and wanted to basically join forces, and Blockbuster turned them away. What would later become Netflix? Can you imagine?
No. Crazy.
Kristin, I think
keeps them up at night to this day.
Yeah, I think we've really made the point on this. Let's give a little advice to leaders. What do you?
Maybe how they stop groupthink.
Well, that's true. I'm not.
I'll give a few.
If we can answer that, by the way, we'll be the greatest podcast in history.
Answer, but we have to give a little hope at the end here.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think great leaders that understand this dynamic, right? So so they unintentionally or they intentionally can disrupt it. They can ask questions like, what are we missing? So this would be like in a meeting setting. What are we missing? Open it up. This one is a vulnerable thing to do, but who sees this differently? What could go wrong? Can you imagine a leader saying this
and Kristin,
in a meeting?
It's in my book, and I've had several organizations try this, but I call it the 8 magic words. Are you getting what you need from me? Now, this is not in a meeting. This is regular checkups with your staff, but I said you have to be willing to have the conversation.
Yes.
But yes, there's something called the perception gap in our coaching, and it shows the only way to narrow the gap is that you have to ask the right questions, because in any meeting, any situation, there's usually about a 20% gap up to. So in other words, even after this episode, there's going to be some people will see this episode a certain way, other people see it differently. Now, if you and I were hosting a panel, we could ask questions. What's the point you thought we were getting across? All of these things, and if we listen, we can narrow that gap and get people more on the same page. And this breaks down all over corporations, politics, families. They don't realize there's a perception gap, and we don't ask the right questions.
Yes, that is so true. I mean, groupthink really reminds us that leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's really about creating environments where truth can surface. And we need that now more than ever, even when that truth is uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The smartest organizations aren't the ones where everyone agrees. They're the ones where people feel safe enough to challenge ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the person disagreeing with the room is the one who just saved the organization. No,
it's true. So, Kristin, I think that's a good place to end. I think we've made a serious point. We encourage you, if you're listening, whether that's in relationships, family, friends, or on the job, you need to be an independent thinker. Don't get caught up in the psyop that I call it, that is trying to persuade you. Dig a little deeper. If it's an important decision, dig a little deeper. And also have a conversation with your superiors and make sure, say, I have some ideas, but sometimes I don't feel comfortable presenting those ideas. And sometimes you can help. We call it managing up. You can manage up and get your leaders to be more open to your ideas.
Yes.
And the last thing...
And do that in a private setting.
In a private setting. And as I mentioned earlier, never go in and go, this is all wrong. I can't believe you all don't see this. Don't gaslight people. Just say, I suggest we look at it this way. There's ways that you can phrase things that will make you much more respected and influential. And at the end of the day, influence is power. That's what we want.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I are both people who led teams. I think it's really important to understand we're not just people that have a podcast. We led teams. We can tell you that if you come in and you are insulting or like you're voicing your ideas in an inappropriate way, inappropriate tone, it closes ears and then you get labeled. I mean, that's just what it is.
It's true.
And you have to be appropriate with your approach. And I love feedback, but you better bring it to me. If it's feedback that, it's personal, you need to bring that to me in a private setting. A team meeting is not the place to air grievances. That really lights me up. So, we actually know what we're talking about here, folks. You want to listen, take our advice.
If you are still with us, thank you. And Kristin, how can, especially our faithful people are with us right now, how can they help us?
Yeah, please share us out. Seriously, we have so many great episodes, including this one. I'm really proud of our message. And there's going to be someone that that can benefit from it. So share us out and continue to interact with us. We love your ideas when you suggest podcast topics.
Absolutely.
Like we really, really enjoy that. So we appreciate every one of you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.